I'm so very glad that you're here this evening. My name is Diane Gibson. I'm the city councilor, very proud to represent District 7 in Albuquerque City Council. I wanted to be the first district to do this, to have this meeting with Dr. Ginger. But a certain counselor and his certain assistant snuck in and snuck it away from us. But that's okay. That's okay, because they had a really good event the last time Dr. Ginger and his folks were here. There are a lot of people here that I would really like to point out, but we just don't have time for that. So please don't let your feelings be hurt, okay? But I will acknowledge Councilor Ken Sanchez, who's here. And we'll be introducing all of these folks here as well. So I have to tell you a story that happened about a year ago, or coming up on a year ago. You know, we were faced with these challenges that came to us after the DOJ report came out. And that was followed by what we now know as a settlement agreement, and which gave us a roadmap of getting to where we want to be in rebuilding Albuquerque Police Department into a proud and a proud institution that it needs to be, that it should be. And so we jumped the gun a little bit. There's been, I'm sure you all have heard that we've had to request from the courts a few more months. And I'll tell you what happened with that is that we jumped the gun. The city of Albuquerque started the time frame at the signing of the settlement agreement. And we did not consider, you know, hiring a monitor, going through that whole process, and then getting it sanctioned by the courts. So that's the reason that we've had to add a little more time to this process. But it's going to be well-used time, and it will be worth it to us. So anyway, when we put out a request for, I think it was a request for information, we received several different responses. I think maybe 10 or 12 that I recall reading. And the celestial bodies lined up in such a way that it will never happen again in anybody's lifetime here, where the ACLU, Albuquerque Forward, City Council, APD, and the Department of Justice all agreed on one responder. And that was Dr. Jim Ginger's organization. And so it's just amazing. We'll never probably get all those entities to agree on the same thing again, but I think we've chosen the right one, and I know that I have some questions. I certainly hope that you all came with questions or comments that you'd like to make. One more thing, and then I'm gonna stop talking, or I'll make the introductions, and then I'll scoot out of the way. I really want this to be productive. I know you hear this all the time at council, but we really want this to be productive and respectful. There are a lot of people here, well over 100 people here. So if you have a question or a comment, please make it brief, if you would. I would like to recognize Mr. Damon Martinez, our U.S. Attorney. Let's see, our DOJ attorney, Luis Salcedo. Thank you, sir. Thank you and welcome. City Attorney Jessica Hernandez. There you are, right in front. Thank you for being here. And then Albuquerque Police Chief Gordon Eden. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. Also, we have the Albuquerque Police Department Assistant Chief, Mr. Chief Bob Huntsman. I saw him. There he is in the back. Thank you, Chief. And APOA President, that's Albuquerque Police Officers Association, Stephanie Lopez. Thank you. Thank you. There are going to be some brief remarks here, but I do have a few things to say about Dr. Ginger to tell you about. He is with, his company is Public Management Resources, and he has a wealth of background. He comes to us very well equipped in analysis, creation, and evaluation of police training, community and police-oriented policing, complaint adjudication, use of force investigations, crisis intervention, and management of specialized units. He has also trained police in these topics. Dr. Ginger is himself a former sworn officer. He has a full understanding of the roles of the police and the protections afforded the public under the Constitution. And more specifically to the current task that we have here in Albuquerque, Dr. Ginger has served as auditor for the Pittsburgh Police Consent Decree and as the monitor for the New Jersey State Police Consent Decree. Yeah. So thank you for being here, Dr. Ginger. Thank you, Councilman. So we do have a few remarks, and then we're going to get you up here. This is, first we have U.S. Attorney Mr. Damon Martinez, if you'd like to say a few words, sir.
Good evening. First, I would like to thank the counselor. Thank you for allowing us to be part of this tonight, and thank you for hosting this event. Let us start from the premise that we all here want our officers to be successful. When our officers respond, for example, to a situation where there's a homeless person with mental illness, we want that officer to have the training and be aware of the tools that are available to that officer to handle the situation right. It's the same thing when that officer responds to a domestic violence call. We want that officer to have the appropriate training and understand what tools are available. And when that officer makes that traffic stop, whether that person is stopping an individual who wasn't thinking that day and just was speeding, or if that officer stops and steps between us, the community, and pure evil, we want that officer to have the training and understand what tools are available and how to deal with that situation. So how do we get there? This settlement agreement gets us there. It deals with mental illness and the homeless. It addresses parts of those issues and makes us aware of what we need to do as a community. It deals with use of force. It also looks out for the officers and looks out for officers who have been in very difficult situations and takes care of them in their mental capacity. Dr. Ginger is important here. Dr. Ginger is the eyes and the ears of the court. He represents the court. He doesn't represent the city of Albuquerque. He represents the court and not DOJ either. He's going to be calling the balls and strikes on this one. And let me ask you a question here, and I'm not asking for you to answer out loud, but I'm asking you for just to think about this. When we talk about transparency with a monitor team, what does that mean? Let me answer that in a couple ways. The first way is things like this. I believe that of the settlement agreements you've worked on, this is something new to what you've done as far as community outreach. You've worked in New Jersey, you worked in Pittsburgh, but this is transparency where you have the ability to ask Dr. Ginger and his team questions. Let me also highlight for you that another place for you to have transparency is with the monitor's report that's going to come out. Now, the monitor's report is going to come out soon, and you will be able to understand what exactly the officers are being judged by, or the police department is being judged by. What's also crucial about that is the officers will be able to understand what they're being judged by. And what you're going to see is that the system, we're working towards the system being fair. We don't want to set the officers up to a standard that they can't reach. Also, with the settlement agreement, you're going to see that with the staffing survey that's going to come back, we will understand what it will take to get to that constitutional policing, to that community policing, as far as a number for police officers, so that we can shoot for that. And what's crucial with that is that when that officer makes that stop, that officer, if need be, and calls for backup, we want to get to that point where that officer will have that backup available, where that officer will know that there's enough officers on the force that won't have to be responding to emergency calls all the time, that we'll have enough officers. This is where we're going, and this is how we get there. So this is a very important night. This is a turning point for us as far as going forward, and thank you for showing up tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Next, let's see, we have Chief Gordon Eden. Would you have a few words for us? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. This is the second visit that we've had from the monitoring team. And one of the things I would just like to say is that we have greatly appreciated their input and their direction on several of our policies, procedures, our training, and helping us put in place systems to better monitor the department. I think this visit's been very productive. We still have 1 day left of this visit, but he brings with his team a wealth of knowledge that have worked in a variety of different areas. And it's very good for us to get the perspective of what happened in New Jersey, what happened in Pittsburgh, and some of the items that Dr. Ginger helped out with in Los Angeles. And as we move through this process, I would just like to state one of the comments that Dr. Ginger told to us on his first site visit is, please remember, this is a marathon. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to do things right from the very beginning to lay the right foundation for the change that we want within the Albuquerque Police Department. And sometimes pouring the foundation of any building becomes the most difficult part. But I again want to thank the monitoring team for their very frank comments and some of the direction that they've been able to provide to my team. As I assured the public in our last public meeting, is that I have a staff that is committed to every paragraph of the settlement agreement as it pertains to the Albuquerque Police Department. There's no doubt or hesitation by any member of my staff. One of the things that I asked of them from the very beginning when the settlement agreement was signed last year is you either have to be on board or you need to leave. And so I have a staff that is fully committed to implementing all aspects of the settlement agreement as it pertains to the Albuquerque Police Department. There's also what I call bridging paragraphs that I also believe are very important, and that's the relationship between the newly formed CPOA and the Albuquerque Police Department. And we've had some very good discussions with the citizen oversight. I believe we have a strong citizen oversight board, and we look forward to working with them in the future. And last but not least, I also appreciate the dedicated work of the U.S. Attorney's Office as they have really stepped up in some areas where we need their help. So again, I just want to thank everybody for being here, and I look forward to tonight's meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. And next we have President Lopez from APOA. A few words for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to start out tonight by saying, first and foremost, thank you to the community for all the support, patriotism, and respect that you showed Officer Daniel Scott Webster within this past few weeks. And also to thank the Sheraton Uptown Plaza itself here, because honestly, if the Sheraton wouldn't have been as generous and as hospitable as they were to the Webster family, because this is where the majority of his family stayed, they were outstanding and went above and beyond. And Damon Kapowski, I'm going to say his name wrong, Kapanowski, was so gracious in helping with shuttle, board, rooming, feeding them, anything that he could do to help. This Sheraton Uptown went above and beyond to make sure his family was taken care of. So thank you as our community and the business owners here, and thank you to the Sheraton Uptown. We're a little bit behind the power curve as far as the association. We came in late to the process of the settlement agreement itself, and now that we do have a seat at the table, I just want to assure you as the citizens of Albuquerque that our mission is to make sure that not only is what is crafted in the policies and procedures for the department is keeping not only our community and the citizens of Albuquerque safe, but our officers as well, and working with the monitoring team, the department, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the city of Albuquerque to ensure that we are all working together and making sure it's a safe place for everybody to live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, Dr. Ginger, I already read my introduction of you. So I've bumbled it already, but I just want to thank you and your team for being here. The schedule that these folks are keeping is insane, and I'm surprised they all are here with eyes open this evening. But anyway, thank you for your work, and thank you, for yourself for being so responsive and available when we've needed you. So I'll turn it over to you. There you go, Doctor.
Well, good evening, and I'm not used to playing to a packed room. Normally there are 3 or 4 people that are sort of nodding off, so the turnout is impressive. It speaks well for this project. It speaks well for the city of Albuquerque, and I'm glad to see each and every one of you here. This is important stuff. Speaking of important stuff, what I'd like to do is introduce my team, because they're the folks that make this possible. I'm just sort of the guy with the baton that stands up there waving it around. The whole team is not here. Some of them are still working, which is not unusual. Usually it's 7 in the morning until 10 or 10:30. But I'll introduce the ones who are here. Dan Giaquinto. Dan was the former director of the Office of State Police Affairs in New Jersey and served opposite me when I was there as monitor. It was his responsibility to work internally with the state of New Jersey to get the New Jersey State Police up to specs. And Dan and I got to know each other quite well. I respect him highly, and that's why he's sitting here. I wanted him and other folks on this team here to be able to provide APD with their hard-earned experience and knowledge from having been under a consent decree as APD is now. So that's why folks from Pittsburgh are here. That's why folks from New Jersey are here. We want APD to get as much knowledge as they can from folks who've been in this situation and navigated successfully through. New Jersey State Police did a stellar job. It took a little longer than expected, but then it always does. In my experience, none of these are done early, especially not if they're done well. So Dan knows internal affairs. That was his major focus with New Jersey State Police, even though his MOS, so to speak, was the entire project. He had a special focus on internal affairs there and was instrumental in bringing them online. The first group in New Jersey State Police to come online and in compliance. And I wanted him to be able to share that information with APD. Lori Owens is my Director of Operations. Those of you who know what Directors of Operations do know how important she is. She keeps people where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be, including me, which is virtually impossible. So she's an integral part of this team. Without her, we probably wouldn't be half as effective as we are. Laura Kennard is on loan to us from CNA. And to show you what a unique field this monitoring field is. CNA was one of our competitors, and yet were willing to loan us the services of Dr. Laura Kennard once we won the contract, because they realized how important her insight and expertise is. She's working on CIT, on training for the mentally ill and response to those with mental illnesses, and her expertise is invaluable. And my thanks to CNN, a competitor, but yet loaned me a key person on the team. Bert Pryke is the former commander, Bert Pryke, formerly of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. And Bert was the fellow in Pittsburgh who managed their response to the consent decree there. Started from 0 and went to 100 in about 3.8 seconds. Bert's only 26 years old. I know he doesn't. The stress was substantial. I do admit that, but he was able to pull it off. And between Bert and the chief of police, we had two folks highly committed to that process. And to this day, I do believe I know Pittsburgh Bureau of Police was the first consent decree, but to this day, I believe the Bureau of Police came into compliance faster than anyone ever has, and probably faster than anyone ever will. So that should explain why Bert's here. That's a bunch of very valuable experience that he now has to share with APD as they work to get this thing pulled together.
Can they stand up so we can see them back here?
I'm sorry.
Can you also tell us what the acronyms are that you're using? What is CNA, what's CIT?
Oh, I'm sorry. Maura, CNA stands for?
Center for Naval Analysis.
And it's a consulting firm. It's led by Chip Stewart, who was the former director of, who was it? NIJ, thank you.
Which is what?
The National Institute of Justice. National Institute of Justice, which is an umbrella research and development project for justice in the United States. They deal with courts, they deal with corrections, they deal with law enforcement. So, anybody that leads that knows a lot about all three of those things. And when Chips left government service, CNA was spun out of that, and his people are some of the best around, some of the very best around. And I apologize for all the acronyms, and if you'll keep me honest, I'll try not to do that. So if I use another acronym, you have permission to throw something at me. Well, I'm gonna be back here, so.
Go back to CIT. She asked about CIT.
I'm sorry, Crisis Intervention Team. Those are the folks that are going to carry the brunt of this process. They'll be out 24/7, 7 days a week, intervening in order to try to avoid escalating situations, but to try to de-escalate instead, and use successful methods other than force, if possible. And that's sort of the key to this whole thing. So, very important process in the overarching process here. Any other acronyms I've spun out that folks don't understand?
Could you have the team stand up so we can see them? Right.
Okay. They normally look a lot better than this, but I've worked them really, really hard for 4 days. Last but not least, and by the way, this is not the full team. We have folks out working right now. So you've got about 5/9 or whatever. Steve Rickman is on the team to handle mental health and outreach issues as well. And his experience is much too long for me to bore you to death with, but for those of you who remember Weed and Seed, this is sort of like the grandfather of Weed and Seed right here. He was one of the original operatives in the Weed and Seed programs and has been doing community outreach and community policing ever since. So he brings a wealth of experience as well. He's probably seen and or evaluated virtually every community-oriented policing process in America since, we're not going to say since when, are we, Steve? But for a long time. So that's the experience up here, augmented with 3 other folks who each are experts in their fields. Pete Sarna, formerly of Oakland PD, back when Oakland PD was really a great organization. One of the premier people in the United States on use of force. And Pete's on the team. He was semi-retired before I talked him into coming back to work. And I think he's gonna hate me for it for the rest of his life. He's not used to working these hours, but he's out there working them anyway. And then we have 2 other folks from New Jersey State Police, both former commandants of the New Jersey State Police Training Academy. So they're here to offer their expertise in training and in use of force. One of them is was also the commander of New Jersey State Police Internal Affairs Unit. And he brought that unit into compliance faster than any internal affairs unit in the United States in the history of consent decrees. So that's why he's here. He's here to help APD do the same thing. So this team, every time I hear that we were the unanimous choice of the group of folks who selected the monitor, it stuns me until I think about who we have here. I've just been reminded, I forgot, you ever leave your child beside the road at the rest stop? I forgot a team member. Dr. Ray Leal joined us recently. Dr. Leal is a professor of criminal justice at St. Mary's University in San Antonio and a resident of Chama, New Mexico. He happens to be Hispanic, he's bilingual, and he's here to help me with community outreach. And I've asked him along to try to help build something that we can leave behind when we go. And it's not required by the decree, it's not something that we're required to do, but I've asked him here to do that so that when we leave, there's something left behind that can prevent us ever having to come back, which is something I'm sure you're all in favor of. But my apologies to Dr. Leal, who hasn't been here today. He was here Monday and Tuesday and had to get back to St. Mary's, but he will be here with the team. He will be an integral part of the team. He'll be an integral part of outreach and an integral part of systems development and evaluation. Thank you. Okay, now down to it, I guess. I'm not going to take much. We've had half an hour or so on introductions, and I want to get to questions. But first of all, let me tell you why I do this work. I started out in this field in 1969, in August. I wasn't supposed to start work until December. I started work in August. And the reason I started work in August is that we were right in the middle of a riot. True story. My first job on a police department, I can't believe I'm saying this in America, but it's true. My first job was ammo bearer for the Tommy gunner. Yeah, shocking. United States of America. They were burning our town down. And our police department was ill-prepared to respond. Can you imagine today? Tommy gunner, it's an automatic weapon. It's a military weapon.
You were using it against the people?
I'm sorry?
You were using it against the people?
I sure didn't. And what woke me up was if we're that far gone, we need to think about it. All right? I wound up being the department's liaison with minority communities. And we learned our lesson fast, and you do in those situations. But that was all that department knew. I was brand new, I was a rookie. That's all they knew. Because they hadn't been trained, they hadn't been led, they had no policy, you know. And I made my mind up right there and then that there's a better way to do this, and we're going to figure out what it is. And that's, to this day, that's what I'm doing. That's the work I'm doing. So, I'm sorry?
What city were you at?
Evansville, Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If you know where it is, it's a river town right on in between Kentucky, across the Ohio River to Indiana. At the time, we had about a 300-man department. It wasn't a small PD. But we were caught blind. We had no training, no understanding, nothing. We were figuring it out as we were going along, and that's what made me decide, you know, there's got to be a better way. Now to Albuquerque. This is a long-term project. As you already know, we've already been here a fairly long time. We got here in June. It's November. It's been 5 months. So we've been here a while. We will work until this job is done. And if it's done in new record time, we will laud the police department for that. But we will also know it's been done right in record time. And that, I think, is the most important piece. The reforms in Pittsburgh slipped. They slipped after an election, a mayoral election. New chief came in, new ideas. The decree was over, so there was no supervision, and he took the department the way he wanted to take it. I'm proud to say that didn't happen in New Jersey, because the office that Dan ran while we were there is still there today. And their job was to continue my job. And I would highly recommend something like that here. After we get to the point that we can leave, there should be something that, it might be internal, it might be external, but there should be something that keeps the monitoring process alive. With that, let me open it up to questions. I know everybody in here has at least one.
Dr. Ginter, transparency, including the release of public information and recordings made by APD, is essential. Getting real reform. We haven't talked about that. What do you and your team intend to do to force APD to record and then release the recordings and those made on cell phones by citizens to stop the cover-ups of their shootings and other use of excessive force? Not one police officer has been charged except the two in the murder of James Boyd, and that was the only exception a recorder refused. You haven't talked about that.
I haven't talked about what?
Forced release of recordings, transparency. You haven't talked about transparency.
Well, I'm sorry, but I thought I had. But in any event, the requirements of the settlement agreement are specific as to that, and we'll make sure they're enforced. And if they're not enforced, we'll report it to the court.
They don't do that.
I'm sorry?
Even now, they don't do that. Impossible to get.
Well, it's not impossible to get. We'll either get it or we'll be here a long time. I mean, that's just the way it works. And I know these guys don't want us here a long time, so it's non-negotiable. I don't work for the chief. I work for the judge. And if I ask for something that is supposed to come to me as part of that settlement agreement, it'll either come to me or we'll be here a long, long time, period. No questions asked. Yes, sir.
I have a question. You're doing a good job. I had a question for you. Have you came up with anything since you've been here that you haven't been able to deal with and you can't get no information from the city or the police department or the community that you will be willing to talk about?
Sure. The answer to that is no. We've not asked for anything we haven't gotten. To my knowledge, we haven't made a suggestion that hasn't been seriously entertained. And when we make a recommendation, the department listens. I just spent 3 or 4 hours Monday with command staff talking through the policy continuum. You know, you have to have a policy before you can do anything. Then that policy has to be trained. Then it has to be supervised. And for those who don't follow the policy, there has to be remedial efforts. I was very well received, and they're beginning to work toward the things that we talked about. I've not found any resistance from APD. And I know some folks don't want to hear this, but when I showed up in Pittsburgh, I was met like this. When I showed up in New Jersey, I was met like this. When I showed up in Albuquerque, I was met like this. Now, you know, that doesn't mean, what? You know, it means, what can you do? What do you got? And the chief and I have had numerous meetings. They take copious notes. We'll see what happens. All right? Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe use the microphone so we can hear the question.
Yeah, Steve,
Yes,
I
sir.
have a question related to mental illness. As far as the training for the police department, dealing with people with they have ADD, ADHD, post-traumatic stress. What type of new training would you recommend for the police department?
Okay, I'm going to let Dr. Kadard, who actually is working with the crisis intervention teams, answer that question.
So the settlement agreement is fairly specific in what it requires pertaining to training on police response to people with mental illness. All of the illnesses that you just mentioned, plus a whole host of others, are covered in the training. And the training is built and conceived of in a way that it's very useful to officers. So it's not just sort of a lecture format training where they're learning signs and symptoms of mental illness, but they're actually doing role play with actors, with peers, with clients and consumers of mental health services to actually hone their skills and practice what things are like in the field, how to appropriately respond, how to de-escalate a situation. And the main thrust is obviously getting people to services, getting people the assistance that they need, and trying to give police officers options and tools for them to effectively do that.
So you're saying it's the job of the police department to get these people to some social service in Albuquerque, outside of being sent to jail or told to go home and stay, or whatever the case may be.
Oh, he has a mic. Did you want to repeat your question? Or?
I had a question. I had a question related to you stated that some of the recommendations as far as training, and I had a question related to, is it the job of the police department to send these people to social service programs within Albuquerque, outside of, well, you would believe that if they had a case and a person had said ADHD, then they would deal with the legal part of the violation of that law, if it was a law violated. And you're saying that it's also a part of the police department job or duties to recommend that that person go to a social service somewhere in Albuquerque to deal with some of the problems with, say, post-traumatic stress or ADD or ADHD.
Mm-hmm. So every police interaction with a person with mental illness is different. The police officer's job is to respond for a call for service. So when 911 calls come in and police officers respond, what CIT training does is provide those officers with some tools and some knowledge and some skills to better handle those situations. And ultimately, we would like to see people get the help that they need and get the services that they need. So that's usually the goal of such an interaction. But again, every situation is different. But one thing I want to emphasize about CIT is that the T in CIT stands for team. So a big component of CIT is building that network and increasing communication and partnership between the mental health community and all of the services and hospitals and mental health providers that you have available here in Albuquerque, and the police department and the city. So part of what we're doing here and part of what the consent decree calls for is not just training for police officers, but increasing that partnership, that communication, and increasing the options for better outcomes for people with mental illness. Sure.
Let me apologize. I wasn't aware that we had a mic set up central here, so this is my bad. I'll apologize. If you want to ask a question, I'm assuming, line up for the mic.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and ask a question. Thank you, Councilor Gibson, for organizing this today. You can see that the community really has a lot of questions and wants to know. And so I think the issue of trust is a really important issue for the monitoring team. I am one of many people in Albuquerque that do not trust APD because of what the DOJ found: unconstitutional excessive force, and because they killed someone I knew. So it's very painful for me to be in a city where I don't trust the police and I fear for my safety. As our DA has said, she also fears for her safety from APD. So my question about trust the monitoring team is, if you have agreed to delay 35 reforms and you have not yet turned in your first report, it's late, from what I understand, how are we supposed to trust that you're really going to make the changes that we desperately need in a city where people are afraid of the police?
Good point. Point well made, by the way, and I don't disagree with anything you said. We got here in June, which was 16 days after we were funded. And what happened, I think, quite honestly, is that the folks who were managing this project were so focused on the project itself that they didn't think about when they would be ready to kick it off. And so what happened is we wasted almost 6 months early on where APD was sort of wandering in the forest without any guidance from the monitoring team. So there's a big chunk of time there that we could have been doing some advising, some counseling, some suggesting, some nudging.
So can you promise that that will not happen again? That you're ready to work and that we're going to see changes?
We're more than ready to work. We've been working since June.
But you said there's been 6 months of kind of wandering around. So, I mean, can you promise that that's not going to happen going forward?
You know, we didn't get here till June. I can't tell you what about
no,
before June.
I think I'm hearing you. I think you're saying
Okay,
that there was
right.
a lot of delays and,
Right,
and
right,
you used the word wandering around. So can you promise that that isn't going to be happening
I
going
can
forward?
promise that this department will get the very best available technical advice from the people who are here to provide it. And if we don't know the answer to a given question, we'll go out and find somebody who does, and they will get the benefit of that information. I can promise you that, period, end of sentence. So, if let me, sir, if you want to ask a question, I'm going to ask you to step back here. That's fine, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. If you'd like to ask a question, please step back here. All right, let me take a step back here and talk a little bit about the monitoring process. We do not direct the police department. We're here to evaluate and provide a resource about best practices in policing in the United States. So the settlement agreement, can you not hear me in the back?
No, that's not well. Be closer to the mic.
If I get any closer, I'm going to be eating it. How about this? Better?
Use the mic and talk right into it. It makes a big difference.
All right, thanks for the technical advice. The monitoring process is articulated by the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement is the document that runs this process. So we have 200 and some odd things that the police department needs to do. Each one of those has been reduced in the monitoring methodology to a series of quantifiable measures. Almost all of them are quantifiable. So we're here to collect data on those things. And we collect that data not by talking to the chief and say, hey, chief, did you do this? But by looking for records created in the normal daily course of business that indicate that they have or have not done something. So that's what we do. In addition to that, if APD says, hey, we're not quite sure how such and so is best practiced in law enforcement in America, we'll either answer that question ourselves or we'll find somebody who can. So we're not here to tell the chief what to do. We're here to determine whether the chief and his police department have complied with the consent decree or the settlement agreement.
And if they don't comply, then what do you do?
We put it in the report that they haven't complied.
And then what's done with the report?
It gets distributed, people read it, and we look, and wait.
With accountability.
Excuse me, please let me answer the question before you interrupt. The report is filed with the court. It's filed publicly. There'll be copies at the libraries. Who's security here? We have security?
This man's grabbing the microphone. It's my turn.
Can we get somebody up here on the mic?
Go ahead. Ask your question. I need to ask my question. Go ahead and make your comment.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question.
Well, if you'll let me finish the answer, then we'll ask a question, okay? That's the way this works. That document will be published. It'll be on websites, the city website, the US DOJ website, eventually when it comes to pass, the monitor's website. There'll be copies in the library for folks that can't retrieve it on the web. If you need a copy, I'll email one to you. If you can't find it anywhere else, I'll email it to you. The point I want to make is this is a very clearly defined process, and we'll be here to follow it. Okay? Any other follow-up on that?
Yeah, what is the cost to the city?
No, that's not a follow-up. Go with the question.
All right, what's the next question?
Okay. Thank you. My name is Andres Valdez. I'm executive director of New Mexico Vecinos United. We've been doing police oversight for 26 years. We're here to express our concerns, including a question about your accountability process, or it doesn't seem to be, from what you said, accountable. But my point is that our concern started from the very beginning when some of our friends like LULAC invited DOJ to come down here. We think they did us a disservice because as I go door to door and talk to people, I'm doing a door-to-door campaign. I have found that people in the community feel that the Department of Justice consent decree and matter is a dog and pony show. And so if that's the case, you're monitoring a dog and pony show, and a few things we were concerned about from the beginning. One is that right from the beginning, behind closed doors negotiations between the mayor and the DOJ, boy, that really looks good, doesn't it? Transparency, and then they called it transparency. Second, you come to town and you don't even want to meet with city council over your $4.5 million contract. Or is that the other guy? And then you go behind closed doors and you meet with some city councilors. That doesn't look like transparency to us.
Is there a question here somewhere?
Yes, there is a question. The question is, the Free Press reported that APD and Eden are already backsliding on the consent decree over a matter that officers are not supposed to shoot at cars. And apparently the chief was defending situations where police officers are already shooting at cars. and that's part of the consent decree, and you're monitoring this, and all you can do is report. That doesn't sound like accountability. I think the people in Albuquerque are being sold a bill of goods, and it doesn't look good. Thank you.
I didn't hear a question there, so I don't think I've got a response.
My name is Ann Cass. I've been attending. Hello? My name is Ann Cass. I've been attending police council meetings. And it appears to me that they don't seem to understand, at least the one I've been attending, don't seem to understand what their responsibility and their duties are. The one I'm attending, which I understand is to be a conduit between the community and APD and the community with respect to problems and policy. The one I'm attending is working on its individual mission statement, and the police show up there on a monthly basis to report the most recent crime statistics. There is very little time set aside for community participation, and I'd like to know what we can do to fix those police councils, because they play an important role. Their mission, as far as I can tell, is spelled out in the consent decree, but they don't seem to get it, and I think they need some help. Thank you.
Thank you. To the extent that you can, and I understand there are rules for discourse in those councils, but to the extent that you can, raise that with your council. If that doesn't seem to get the situation resolved, raise it with us and let us know what's going on. It's our job to review their performance.
I've done that. Both of those. That's why I'm here.
You've raised it with us? No. Oh, with them. Okay. All right. So you're raising it now. Okay. You had me worried there for a second.
So do we contact you via email, sir, on that concern?
You can. The email address, and I'm going to ask that you not bombard me with something that is not a question or something that we need to know about. So I don't need the political stuff. For those of you who are into politics, I don't need it. I don't use it. I'm here to evaluate a document and the performance on that document. The email address is pmrinc@mac.com.
At what.com?
Mac, like the computer.
Okay, thank you.
So if you, let's do it this way. If you have an issue and you believe there's something that's required by the decree and you believe it's not being followed, as is the case here, send me an email, tell me what it is, give me a brief description of what the problem is, and we'll get back to you, okay? In fact, one of the things I'm doing to facilitate that is we met with people out at the law school yesterday, day before? 2 days ago, and we're recruiting UNM law students to populate our office here, and they'll be the ones screening those questions, getting them to the right member of the team so that we can get back to you, all right? But please understand what that website or that web address, email address is for. It's for questions that you have about performance that you think might be problematic. I don't want to hear the politics. You know, I don't want to hear the fight between city council and whoever. I'm not interested in that. My job is within the four corners of that settlement agreement. So if you've a problem, an issue, let us know. If you have a complaint, that's for the political process. Okay? All right? Are we okay with that? I don't want to restrict your access, but I also don't want to spend time debating political points. Yes, sir.
My question, I have actually 4. The first 3 involve how will the monitor respond to particular situations, and the 4th one is how will DOJ respond. And the situations are, to start with the one that's already been mentioned, shooting at vehicles. Although APD was told in 2011 by the Police Executive Research Forum that its policy allowing shooting at vehicles was a bad policy, was told extensively in the DOJ report in April of last year it was a bad policy. The settlement agreement required the policy be changed. On Memorial Day, a police officer shot at an SUV in a parking lot which had 2 women and a 5-year-old child in it The officer got out of the way of the SUV by simply stepping back. If he'd actually hit the driver, the SUV might have swerved and hit him. Chief Eden went on television and said the shooting was justified. So I would like to know, my first question, but let me ask them all before, is
Let's
question?
do one each.
How
that's fair.
will the monitor address situations like that where it's clear the city is not following and the chief of police doesn't even appear to understand what's required?
All right, thank you. Let me answer that question directly right now before we get carried away. All right. The question is not how will we respond. The question is how have we responded? Because we're on the ground working. We got a draft policy a few days ago that included shooting at vehicles. And my guys, two of my use of force experts, have been working for 3 days to make people understand that A, that's not allowable, except in conditions where the officer's life is threatened. And they're working on getting that policy revised.
Can we get your name, sir, please?
Alan Wagman.
Hi, I'm Annie Onderdonk. I'm serving as chair of the Northeast Heights Community Policing Council. And I hear a lot of pain in this room and anger. But I want to kind of change the look of it, because I do believe that at least my CPC has been so responsive. The officers that are there to a person have been so approachable, so open to talking about it. 2 of our officers were involved in shooting, and they talked about it, and they are so human about it. And I think that that's what's missing. So I would like to encourage everybody here and to tell your neighbors to please come to your local CPC, Community Policing Council meetings. Ours happens to be next Tuesday, 6:30 at the North Domingo Baca Multi-Generational Center at 6:30 p.m. We are open to any kind of comments and questions. You will be able to learn about the police and talk to them one-on-one. Thank you. I don't have a question. It's a comment to please come and be a part of the solution. We're all working together.
The question I heard there was, would you please come to the CPC meetings? Who's next? Community Policing Councils.
Yeah, my name is Pablo Vigil, and my question is, are you aware of the demographics of New Mexico and Albuquerque? I mean, that's my question. We have 47% Hispanics, 41% whites, 7% Native Americans, 3% African Americans, and 2% other, you know. And we have probably 80% of the incarcerated people are Hispanics. Mm-hmm. So my question, are you aware of these demographics?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Ralph Arianes. I represent LULAC and the Hispano Roundtable of New Mexico. And I think that LULAC did a great job by calling for the Department of Justice to investigate the Albuquerque Police Department. I think the results speak for themselves. The previous question that was asked is very similar to mine, in that 50% of the population in Albuquerque is Hispanic, 50% of the population in New Mexico is Hispanic. The majority of those that are arrested or victims of APD are Hispanic, and a good percentage of the Hispanic community is Spanish-speaking only. Yet, as I see your team, and including yourself, Dr. Ginger, I don't see anybody here qualified to deal with those investigative issues, especially dealing with Spanish-speaking people, victims, and those that are arrested. How are you dealing with that? One person for community outreach does not qualify for the kind of workload that you're going to need in dealing with Hispanic arrested people.
Well, I think your information is just incorrect. It's just incorrect. We've had...
What is incorrect?
Your information is incorrect. We've had it...
Which part?
Excuse me. May I? My turn now?
Go ahead.
Okay, good. Thank you. The day we announced our team, we had an Hispanic on it. David Torres from the New Jersey State Police, Spanish speaker and Hispanic. And yet I hear that some folks have been running around screaming, we have no Hispanics, we have no Hispanics.
I'm one of them.
Yeah, I know. You and I have met,
yeah.
We've talked.
Right.
We now have the second Hispanic on the team. This team as a composite is almost 50% minority if you include blacks and women, which are protected classes in the law enforcement field. Now, you may not like those facts, but those are the facts.
Women aren't minorities.
In policing,
protected class.
In policing, they are considered a protected class.
That's true in everything.
Okay,
thank you.
That's my answer. Thank you for your question.
Hi, Dr. Ginger. Peter Simonson from the ACLU. I think it was in August, a couple of news outlets reported that SWAT deployments were actually, I think they were up this year. I think at the time, about 7 months into the year, there had been about 30 some odd SWAT deployments compared to, I think, 36 or 39 that had happened in all of last year. So that suggests that there may be an increase in SWAT calls. By the same token, evidently, there were no deaths that were reported as a result of those SWAT deployments, whereas last year, in the entire year, there were 3. So there's clearly some things going on with SWAT deployments right now. The signs are encouraging. I'm a little concerned by the fact that there have been so many SWAT deployments in such a short time during this course of the year. I've brought this question up with Chief Eden, and I think there's maybe some disagreement with the data. And I don't know if news was not reporting it accurately. But I'm curious if indeed it is true that SWAT deployments are up, but officer-involved shootings and the resulting deaths are down. Is that a result of changes in the department? And if you can just talk broadly about what kinds of changes are happening around the organization of SWAT teams and the deployment, how those teams are being deployed. Thanks.
Thank you. You're right, deployments are up and injuries and deaths are down, which bodes well for the training that has occurred with special weapons and special tactics folks at APD. I'm an old SWAT guy myself, so I can't believe I'm saying this, but the SWAT response, quote unquote, has been softened substantially, I think. And we're focused, I believe, now this is early on, and I've not written the final report yet, but it appears they've been softened. It appears they're more focused on negotiation as opposed to action, which is exactly, even back in the 60s when I was on the SWAT team, it was exactly what we wanted. You know, the process of containment is important, and in some instances, SWAT is absolutely necessary for that, for containment, to buy time for the soft processes to engage. And it appears that that's exactly what APD is doing.
Am I supposed to hold that? Okay. I had 2 questions, but one's been dealt with, and that's regarding non-compliance with shooting at vehicles. My other question, comment question is, and this is based on a news broadcast today, and if it's wrong, please stop me. This afternoon, earlier, it was reported that you, Dr. Ginger, at the ultimately last moment, canceled a scheduled meeting with the Police Oversight Commission. It was further reported that this was the second time that you had stood that commission up. This appears to me to be very unprofessional behavior. It makes me really question whether you have a commitment to accountability and to transparency, and it makes me wonder what we're getting for all the money that we are paying to have you here. Thank you.
Good question. Good question. Thank you. You were there yesterday? Dan was there at CPOA yesterday. That's why I have a team. You find that one person can't be in 27 places at once. More importantly, let me ask a return question. What do you do when your boss calls?
I'm retired.
Oh, okay. All right, I needed a conference call with my boss. All right, and unlike most people, my boss can put me in jail. The judge. All right, when the judge calls me, I'm going to return the call, and I apologize to POB and CPOA. We did notify in advance as much as possible, but I mean, honestly, you know, my boss called me and I had to take it. So I apologize again for what happened. I don't know about the first time, so I don't think I did it, but it could be. You know, I mean, people get me places where they say I have to be, and it could have happened.
So will you reschedule that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just so you'll know, this is a highly kept secret, so nobody tell, right? About December 1st or so, I'll be back here every day. So it's not going to be any more flying in, flying out. And the reason for that is we're ready to go to work now. The first 6 months or so were spent prepping to go to work. And now we're ready. And so I'm going to be here for the foreseeable future as a resident of the city of Albuquerque. And so I doubt very seriously I'll be standing you up again, because I don't have to cram 3 months worth of work into a week. But I do apologize.
My name is Ted Niemiecki. And anyway, 1969, I never forget this year. That's how long I've been citizen and resident of the city of Albuquerque. Those were good years. Anyway, well, I got involved about a year and a half ago, really, with police work and so on. Now, I have two questions. One question to Dr. Ginger.
One question, please.
Okay,
a lot
I'll
of folks trying to get to the mic. So, most important question first.
Okay. Laying foundation, as Chief mentioned, laying foundation. How long it takes to lay foundation, and how long takes to get something going? Because now we are in that APD not reacting, period.
Good question. How long does it take to build the foundation? And any of you who are familiar with construction work know the answer to that question. It's not slapped up overnight. If you do, what happens? The house comes down. All right? We've been here 6 months trying to work with APD to build the foundation. I spent about 4 hours Monday training, working with command staff about building foundation. So, you know, you don't want to rush the guy that's building your foundation. You know, that's all I can say.
So my second question.
One question.
Thank you. May I hold it? Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Ginger, my name is Nora Tachias Anaya. I was the person that was tied to the podium with a chain to bring letters to Mayor Berry. We delivered them that day, but I was arrested and injured, and that was just last year. What my main question is that we're seeing the fact that there is not transparency, and of course that word isn't what I really want to use. Everything has been behind closed doors. The main problem that we see, and just for your information, we had not been getting visited by anyone to give our input. And I thank you for this moment in time, but I really think that you're going about it in the roundabout way. In New Mexico, we don't have a lot of roundabouts. We really need your sincere closeness. Visit with us. Ask the people that have been in front talking to the consul. The consul can only do so much. We need your help, and we need it now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And the question I heard there was, will you help us? And the answer to that is absolutely. You know, I'm not required to live in Albuquerque, but I'm going to. And I'm going to because I understand this is not a visit me once, visit me twice, visit me 3 times process here. This is complex anyway, and it's even more complex when you consider the dynamics of the city of Albuquerque. So I made that decision early on, actually, but it's been validated that I need to get here for some extended periods of time. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that I believe the word stakeholder should be removed from the consent decree. But my question is that I have reached out to Damon Martinez, APD, and a few other people on the city council, and I met with hostility by 2 U.S. Marshals coming to my house. I really don't appreciate that. I am here to fix the problem also. I would like to know why these U.S. Marshal, or why Damon Martinez and APD have not reached out to me, because they consider me not a stakeholder, I'll put it that way. I believe everybody in this state is a stakeholder.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't answer that question. I'm not privy to the facts, but I can say this is the second time you and I have visited, at least, right? And that will continue.
Okay, I would like to meet with you, actually.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. We'll set up an appointment. No jostling, gentlemen.
How are you?
Good, sir. Thank you. Yourself?
My name is Joseph Powdrell. I am a long-term resident of Albuquerque, probably longer than you are old. Maybe not that old. But I was an NAACP president. I just want to preface my question by making it clear as to why and where I'm coming from with the question. I was NAACP president during 2005, 6, and 7. At that time, we had what was called police brutality. Nowhere near the number of deaths that we now experience or we've been experiencing. My question to you is, let me say this too as well. I met with the then police chief, Schultz, on 17 different occasions about insinuations of brutality. And he successfully or attempted to say to me that all 17 were justified according to the laws that justify a police officer's reaction. You know, my question to you is, there is a climate that allows, that we felt, allowed the police department to behave the way it behaved. That climate was perpetuated by, you know, the city administration, us as citizens. How much consideration was given to the behavior and the performance of the powers that be prior to your coming? Does the team give any consideration to the climate that existed prior to your coming?
Climate is a major piece of what we do. So it was considered. You'll find, I think, if you talk to the team members, I can't tell you how many man-hours were put into reviewing news reports, news videos, to try to get a feel for what was here. And we've followed up by these kinds of meetings to continue that process. And before I go any further, are you related to the barbecue Padrillos? Thank you for lunch day before yesterday. But that's a critical piece of what we do. Even before we submitted our proposal in December, we spent a great deal of time reading news reports about what was going on, trying to get a feel for what was Albuquerque. That goes on today. We still get Google alerts, 158 a day, about the Albuquerque Police Department.
Can I make this in one other statement?
Sure.
On behalf of the citizens of this great city, you know, what you are here to do is real crucial to us, you know, and I'm sure you probably know that, but we're going to be here after you gone, you know, and this is a very livable city. It's a great city. It's got some good people in it.
Agree.
And
I agree.
I just want to emphasize on behalf of the constituency that I probably represent, and that's Albuquerque. Y'all do a good job for us, man, because, you know, we want to stay here. We want to keep bringing people here, and we want to have a good relationship with those who protect and serve. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I can assure you that the outreach will continue. That barbecue lunch, by the way, I didn't walk into a restaurant to buy it. I bought it for probably 35 or 40 people at a get-together on the southeast side that we sponsored. And we did a lot of outreach there. We met a lot of folks. I met some folks that we made a note on the spot that we wanted to get them in contact with the current leadership of the citizen police councils, because this woman had lived these exact same problems 25 years ago and had done good work to solve them. So they need to hear from her. So that's the sort of stuff that we're doing. It's not all the monitoring team. You know, we're trying to put people in touch with people to get things done, to magnify our ability to reach out and make a difference.
Dr. Ginger, thank you very much for holding this forum. I really appreciate it. My name is Ellen Copeland, and I'm a behavioral health professional, and I work at UNM Psychiatric Center. So the population with mental illness is very near and dear to my heart. And I have worked with some very good police officers with APD who are crisis intervention team trained. And my question is, how far along are the officers now in terms of training to be fully certified to be CIT, professionally trained? And how many hours of training are they required? Because what I know in the population I work with and the police I've dealt with, those are the best cops on the force. And I'd like to see everybody, every single cop trained as a CIT officer.
Excellent question, and thank you for that question. And I want everybody to know I'm about to do something that no PhD has ever done before in the history of mankind. I'm going to turn a mic over to somebody else. Dr. Kennard is our specialist on mental health. She is here to deal with those exact issues, and I'm going to ask her to give you the briefing because she knows 5 times more than I do.
So a significant amount of the force has already been through the 40-hour CIT training, which is generally considered the certified CIT training. The goal is to have 100% of the force trained in the 40-hour certification course. And there's a course going on this week. There are several more courses scheduled. I believe 3 more 40-hour week-long courses before the end of this year. And if you read the settlement agreement carefully, there's also sort of continuing education requirements around mental health issues. So again, the crisis intervention unit and the people in charge of that training are working really hard to craft the follow-up training and the continuing education training carefully so that, you know, it meets the needs of the community. It's emphasizing things that are really happening in the community. So they're moving along really nicely.
For what it's worth, it wasn't that special because that's a PhD too. But I mean, that's the way I work this team. I bring the best people I can find and I listen to them. Everybody at this table knows probably more about their area of expertise and how it applies to APD than I do. And that's why they're here. You know, they're out there day to day. Looking at data, looking at training programs. In fact, Dr. Kennard is reviewing the CIT training this week. so that we make sure that what the syllabus says gets provided. And that's just the way we work it. We don't take anybody's word for anything. So you can rest assured that if Dr. Kennard says that that CIT training is good, it is good. It represents the way it should be done. That's her area of expertise. She knows probably more about it than anybody in the country, and I know for a fact she spent more time in police cars observing those types of functions in progress than anybody else in the United States. And by the time she's through here, that number will be probably doubled. But she's not a theorist, she's a practitioner who happens to have a PhD. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Chuck Anthony. I've been in Albuquerque since August 1969. Okay. I've worked for, and I've been more than a casual observer of APD and its operations. I was a newsman for the Journal for a number of years, covering APD principally and other police agencies, and then morphed into small business owner, and then later a political activist, which I am now, community organizer and political activist. But I have noticed there's been a lot more presence of APD officers in the Albuquerque public schools on a daily basis. And 40 years ago, that job assignment of school resource officer was more like a punishment. It was like a school crossing guard or something. It was treated that way. But now they're interacting when school security or principals don't want to deal with or don't know how to deal with autistic children especially, and other kids that are already at early mid-school area getting in and out of the criminal justice system. Well, I think the impetus should be on keeping them out of that criminal justice system and dealing with the kids from the behavioral health viewpoint, and getting some early on intervention and understanding. But I know personally, have a grandson who's autistic, and several encounters of overreaction of the APD officers and uses of force, not to the extent we've seen on TV recently in other cities, but you know, at least, yeah, my question is, are you going to, in your monitoring, also engage with the Albuquerque Public Schools and their interaction with the Albuquerque Police Department? Because I understand your scope is probably limited to just APD's actions, but you know, there's some problems, I think, festering there that could create some headlines we don't want to see.
Right, understand. And it wouldn't be the first time lately in the last few months that we've had an issue like that. And what I can say is, as this project goes on and old problems die and new problems raise up, we're here to assist APD in developing structure and response to those. We're here both as monitors and as people who provide technical assistance. And I've argued for years that's not a good blend, because you know, if I tell the chief how to do something and he does it exactly like I tell him how to do it, it's kind of hard for me to criticize him. So I really like the TA and the monitoring process to be separated, but you know, for some strange reason that doesn't happen, and I don't know. Maybe eventually we'll get there, but our job is to assist APD in responding to problems it confronts. And so, you know, or preventing even better. So if that gets to be an issue, the chief is welcome to reach out, and his folks are welcome to reach out to us anytime. If we see it as an issue, we'll raise it with the chief. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Charlie Bennett with the La Mesa Community Improvement Association, one of the city's graduated weed and seed sites. Wanted to find out how many officers will you require to comply? And how much should they be paid?
I think you just asked me a loaded question. I hate to answer this way, but I'm going to be honest with you always. That is not my job. But before everybody gets bent out of shape, it is a job of one of the fellows that does the best job at that job in the United States, Alexander Weiss, PhD, Weiss, University of Chicago professor, who's conducting an almost complete manpower allocation study now. Now, I don't think he's addressing compensation, is he? So he will give the definitive answer. The other good news is, if he doesn't give the right answer, I'll know. Because that's what I used to do for the San Antonio Police Department for years. Yeah, that's true. You'll know before I do. But I did manpower allocation and deployment for SAPD for years. So, you know, it's not that I don't have expertise. If the city doesn't get a good job, I'll know it. Thank you. Sure.
Hi, my name is Roger Mickelson. I have a question that's probably beyond the bounds of your study. However, I'll make it fairly short and sweet, I hope. To what extent can you or will you be looking at the external, state, federal, whatever, legislative and policy determinations that impinge upon or slow APD in its progress?
To a certain extent, but it's obviously not the focus of our work. But I will not be bashful to call the ball if I see legislation that is problematic for outcomes with this decree. And I mean, I won't have to tell the chief, he'll already know. But you know, it's my job to make sure that the chief understands and has the resources he needs to get this job done. And so he'll find me a good ally if indeed, you know, we need more people. If Alexander Weiss says we need more people, then I'm going to be on the monitoring process of determining how that happens and whether or not it happens effectively.
Hi, I'm Sheila Pugash. I'm a resident of Albuquerque for many, many years. I am retired from APD as a civilian. I have a question based on something that you said earlier, and I hope I misunderstood it, but you said you're not required to leave behind something. Well, I thought the whole process was that at least we train the trainers so that we would have changes and we would leave something behind.
What we will leave behind is a police department that is at the state of the art. Maybe I misspoke, but I want to leave more than that. The heart of the issue is here, I think, the ability of people with special needs to be addressed, managed, and handled properly. That's a big piece of this. There's also a great deal of, I hate to say sadness, but I guess that's it, that's already occurred even before we got here. And I'd like to be able to leave something behind that deals with that. I'm not sure what it's going to be. We're working on it. But I really would like to be able to address that piece.
But are we training the trainers so that after your team leaves?
Absolutely, yes.
And this is a statement. Not everybody who encounters APD is mentally ill. There are a lot of citizens in this community that encounter APD, and we need to be addressed also. Thank God I haven't had the opposite side of the encounters. But I think a lot of people are afraid. They're not necessarily mentally ill people.
Understand, and I think you'll see a change. I think you'll see over a period of time, this doesn't happen overnight, but over a period of time, I think you'll see a change given what APD is doing with its training, with the folks that they bring in to assist. I think you'll see a change across the board. And interestingly enough, we'll find out in a few years whether that's happened. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Dr. Tom Alina, University of New Mexico. I'm here with a couple of my students tonight. Much to their chagrin, I had to end our class early to be here. A bummer.
Sorry, guys.
what we're studying is a concept called restorative justice. And I guess the question I have at this point, while I applaud the resources going into APD, notwithstanding the fact that I'm not sure APD or the city has ever publicly acknowledged the validity of the findings. The actual question that arises from this is, what are your thoughts as to not just putting money into APD, but repairing the harm that this culture of excessive force has done actually to the community? While I see the value of bringing APD up to a certain set of standards, but what about the harm done to the community itself through this culture of deadly force?
You know this doesn't count because it's one PhD to another, so that probably is one of the best questions I've ever encountered in a public meeting. Seriously, I'm not being flip. Interestingly enough, as coincidence might have it, Dr. Ray Leal, the new team member, his specialty is restorative justice. And it's one of the reasons he's here. It's something that I think we need to have a dialogue about. Sure. And listen, I apologize, guys, for making you miss class time.
For everyone. Dr. Ginger, thank you very much for being here and for your staff that you've brought. My question, some individuals psychologically may go into police work to be close to the criminal element, whether for the thrills or for the lucrative benefits. Does your mandate include developing psychological evaluations to test and to determine the tendencies of prospective officers?
Good question. The answer is they're already developed, they're already being used, they're already part of APD screening process. Our job is to make sure that they're uniformly used and appropriately used. So those mechanisms are already in place at APD. It's part of their screening process now. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my question is, officers are required to turn on lapel cameras whenever they interact with the public, correct? So what is the compliance rate since you got here? And what are the consequences if they don't?
Let me clarify, they're not required to turn their on-body recording device on anytime they interact with the public. There are specific events they're specifically required to activate on. So everybody needs to be clear on that. It's not a 24/7 news channel. It's when things get to a certain point, you encounter resistance, you encounter difficulty, that unit needs to be switched on. In responding to certain types of calls, it needs to be switched on. So, Bert, you up for it? No. No? Okay. Sure. Sure.
Well, I already asked my one question, but if I could follow up, that could get tricky because if things are heating up, maybe you don't want your officer taking a moment to, fumble with a camera. Maybe it should be required to be turned on. I thought it was you have to turn it on as you encounter the public. That's what I thought.
Not the case according to policy.
Here in Albuquerque or nationally?
Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me?
Locally or nationally?
Here, and that conforms to national practice.
So when are they required to turn it on? When things heat up?
I'm sorry?
So they're only required to turn it on when things heat up?
Well, they're required to turn it on when they encounter any of a specific number of listed processes like active resistance or, Bert, help me out here.
Still working through the policy, and even nationally, they're still working through the policy.
Well, that's true.
This is still rapidly evolving. The technology is new. The deployment through the police departments is new. Policies are still catching up with it. We went through the process today of learning all about the cameras, and it's a lot more cumbersome than you might think, just strapping on a camera. Placement of the camera, where it is, what it's going to pick up because of that placement, whether it's going to be in the way of if he wears it here, how's he put his seatbelt on if he wears it over here. It's a difficult concept, and like I said, the policies are still evolving, and we're looking at national standards, and those are still being developed.
Right, and if it's paragraph 220 of the consent decree, if you want to take a look at, that's a public document, by the way. You can find it online in the libraries. The specific instances when, at this time, the requirement of the settlement agreement is that they activate upon those instances. We're in the process right now, Bert and I are, of giving APD advice on that policy and of getting it cleared to submit to the Department of Justice. So it's in flux.
Do you have?
This is the settlement agreement, and it's public record. You know, I mean, I could take time and read it to you, but I don't think you. All right, and mightily bored you'll be.
How long is it? Is it multiple pages?
Well, paragraph 220 is. A through H. And it spans 2 pages. So I don't know if you want me to sit here and read it or not. I really think if you want to have an intelligent discussion, take a look at the paragraph, let's have a discussion.
So my question was, what do you think, what is the rate of compliance since you got here on that policy? And I know that you could do a ballpark. Somebody said 0. Who said that? The policy isn't in effect yet, so the response is 0. The policy has not been issued. Okay. It hasn't been approved by the monitoring team, and excuse me, you know, I don't interrupt you, sir. Okay, thank you. The policy hasn't been finished yet. It hasn't been submitted to Justice yet. Justice hasn't commented on it yet. The comments haven't come back to the monitoring team at APD for revision, and that's when we'll know what's required. Sure.
My name is Bill Cass, and I've been attending community policing council meetings as a citizen, asking questions. And one of the purposes of the community policing councils is to be a conduit between citizen complaints, suggestions, policy suggestions, and in order to do that, included in the consent decree is the information that the police are to provide along the lines of policy. So my question is, and my further observation is first that police have been very non-responsive. APD has been non-responsive in this regard. And my question is, what is the monitor process going to do to improve the responsiveness to the community by APD? They have to respond to you, but I haven't heard where they're required to respond to the community.
Well, that'll be measured in part in APD's implementation and activation of those community policing councils. That's the major conduit for information flow from and to the community. It'll also be dealt with in our monitors reports, which come out every 4 months for the first 2 years, and then every 6 months after that. So it'll be handled both places. You should get the information you need.
I have one comment, and that is there's so much delay built into this process. I mean, there's a 6-month reporting period,
right.
And nothing happens. And there's a month between each CPC meeting, and a question raised at one meeting is not responded to at the next meeting. Mm-hmm. The delays are just continually build up. There's no mechanism. I'd like to know my question is, what's the mechanism for improving that responsiveness?
The mechanism is the CPC. Raise that at the CPC, raise it with me on an email, raise it with APD if you haven't already. And, you know, we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of here overnight. This is a long-term. I think my comment the very first day I had a public meeting in Albuquerque with the media was, I need to remind you of one thing. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And we all know you have 2 different strategies for those races. And the strategy here is to be careful, make certain we have the right policy, make certain that policy gets trained, make certain that training is implemented in the field, and if it isn't, supervise accordingly. Right? That's the process that's going to get us out of that, but you can imagine that's going to take a while. And I know you've already been waiting a long time. I know. We just can't do it fast. You know, I mean, I could fly in here and tell the chief what to do, but it's not going to work. Right? We need to develop jointly responses to these issues that APD can live with and that you can live with. Okay, yes, ma'am. It looks like we have 3. Let's take the last 3.
Thank you. My name is Liz Thompson. I'm a former state representative, and I chaired the Behavioral Health Subcommittee. But my question is not about behavioral health. My question is about the lapel cameras. You said that it will take, you know, we'll go back to the DOJ and all of this to be approved. But it seems to me like best practices would be to go ahead and do it without waiting for all that. I mean, I imagine there are some downsides. And the practice of waiting until things escalate, then it still is a he said, she said, because you don't know what caused it to escalate. So what stands in the way of making that a program right now that they turn on their lapel cameras as soon as they have an encounter with anyone? And it protects the police as much as the public. So what stands in the way of doing it now?
Good question. You can do it. You can do it now, or you can do it right. I'm sorry. You can do it now, or you can do it right. I'd much rather do it right. I'm sorry. I know you guys are in a hurry. I know you're hurting. If we do it wrong, what happens?
You fix it later.
We start all over again, because the training has already been done. Excuse me.
Hello. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I think it's important that we hopefully can love each other, and enemies, and even acquaintances. But the main thing I think that's important here, and it disturbs me more than anything, is this. And that is, we have tranquilizer guns to take down cats, big bears, and everything under the sun. But we have to shoot people that are unarmed 14 times, 10 times, 5 times. I want to know why that has to be done. Why does it have to be done?
The reason police officers are empowered to use deadly force is because they encounter deadly situations. Never seen a tranquilizer gun that works immediately. I've never seen a beanbag that is 100% effective. I've never seen a taser or other electronic device that's 100% effective. So the reason it has to be done that way is that at times it has to be done that way. The trick is to make sure those are as few as possible, and when it's implemented correctly. Yes, ma'am.
This is an amazing attendance tonight. What I'm worried about is when you have your next community meeting, that people will think, well, do I really want to go and sit there again for 2 hours and not get proper answers? I understand that and I don't have a question. This is just actually, I'm urging you to just consider this, okay? I understand that you're perhaps between a rock and a hard place. I understand that, and that you want to do things right and so on. I also understand when you're talking about this as a marathon. But I think you also need to take into consideration that the people here have been running that marathon for a bloomin' long time now, and the people are already really tired. And to now hear, yeah, but hang on, we're working on it, or no, it's not the right time yet, etc., etc. We don't want to hear that anymore. I'm sorry.
I understand.
And I understand that you might not be able to change it immediately. I will go to the next community meeting, but if I don't get proper answers then, I couldn't be bothered to go to another one. Mr. Rickman urged me to consider being part of the community policing councils. I don't have a question. I already said that. But then I've got to hear that Bill Cass says, well, he doesn't know whether it actually brings that much. So again, there are several points where you can actually tighten it up and actually make sure that something happens. I'm sorry I took so long.
No, I don't think anyone disagrees with that. No one wants to see bad results. And all I can say is we do have a choice. We can make change fast and watch it fall apart because we didn't consider everything that needed to be considered, or we can make change right and it'll last. So I happen to vote for the latter, and everybody else I know who's in this business votes for the latter. I understand the pain. I understand the hurry. I understand the angst. But if we mess this up, this is our last best chance. Literally our last best chance in the history, to my knowledge, in the history of these operations. No agency's ever been through 2 of them. Ever. Think about that for a minute. Ever. No agency's ever been through 2 of them. If we mess this one up, we don't get a second chance. That's it. This settlement agreement empowers the police department to do things that it's probably already tried to do but couldn't get the funds for. So I understand we're all in a hurry. I'm in a hurry too. But I want to do this right. And to not do it right carries serious, serious, serious implications. This is our last best chance. I've been handed a note asking me if I wanted to tell you when the report will be issued. And the answer is yes. And I will tell you to the best of my ability. There are a lot of things that stand between me right now and when that report gets released, not the least of which is a federal judge that wants to read it first. That's kind of fair, you know. But the plan is to have that report out by the end of the month. Right. And it, you know, that's the plan. We all know about plans, but we're going to be somewhere around there. We might miss it a day or two. We might be a day or two early. But it'll get out as soon as I can release it, knowing that it's the best job I can do. Period. End of story. Okay. Now you see why the Director of Operations job is so important. And she's right. She's always right. That's why she's Director of Operations. We have some hoops to jump through, not the least of which is briefing my boss on what's in the report, which at this time is scheduled for the 1st of December. So the report, will, while it may be ready until that job gets done, it won't be released. But you can see the window that we're working with. The other question that I've been asked to respond to is why policies are important. And I think I've already addressed this to a certain extent, but I'll do it again. Without policy, there can't be training. Without training, there can't be supervision. Without supervision, there can't be discipline. Without all of those things, there can't be change. If the policies are bad, what happens? Your foundation is bad. That's the piece. That's the critical piece. So that's why they're so important.